Today we will learn, a lot of things are happening and people claim a lot about the blood of Christ. But most of us, we don't have a proper understanding of it, what that means, what is even the blood is for, and especially as for today's message. The question is why almost every covenant which we see in the Bible, or mainly two covenants, both of them, they require blood. And we will learn it today. And it is usually a lot of people think or take it as a ritual element, but it does have a meaning. It's not like a ritual. It does have a meaning. Like when we do the communion, and Jesus didn't take the blood, he took the wine. So it was just a resemblance. What is the meaning of that? So if we just see what the blood is, blood mostly represents life, even death, sacrifice, purification, covenant, commitment. So always remember there is a difference between any promise or covenant. Covenant is not like something which is just a promise of God, but covenant comes with so many obligations. It means God requires us to do some things. And if we don't do those things, actually we are breaking the covenant. So today's main verse is Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. And I'm sorry, Teresa is not here. She has to go somewhere. So it says, for the life of the flesh in the blood, and I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement by the life. So this is very important. We understand this verse, which is from the Leviticus, which is Moses' law, and it is a ceremonial part of the Moses' law, where it was teaching about the sacrifice and atonement. And the most important thing here we need to understand is what is atonement. Atonement is mostly a covering. The literal meaning of this word is a covering. So atonement is God's work of reconciling sinful humanity back to himself by dealing with the sin through the substitution sacrifice. So it's a substitution. So in the Old Testament, what was the substitution? A lamb or a bull or a goat. But we will see that what was the substitution in the New Testament. The sin separates us from God, but through the death of Jesus Christ, God bridged the gap and restored the fellowship. So we have to understand first the main points of the what is the substitution is. In Leviticus 17:11 says, it is the blood that makes atonement of one's life. So it's mean that a blood is kind of using as something which is giving another person life. So that's the atonement is. The sacrifice always required a mediator. So priest offered the blood before God on the behalf of the people. So we know that all the rituals, what happened in the tabernacle or later in Solomon's temple or second temple. So the priest there was 100 and 1,000 of, not 1,000 of actually priests, they were doing all those sacrifices every single day. And that was pretty much their job, and it was a very hard job. so which they were doing. And what was happening at that time? Actually, that whenever any animal, go back a little bit. So what happened, if I do some mistake, and that mistake was not intentional, I didn't make any plan for that. So what I do, I go to the priest and I take a lamb or goat or turtle dove or young pigeon. It's depend upon my financial condition. If I'm a rich person, then it's got to be a bull. So that was temporarily covering that problem or that sin. And then there was some sins which I planned and I do it. For that, I can't do that kind of sacrifice. For this, there was a Yom Kippur, and on that particular day, actually priest go in the most holy place and he shed the blood inside the tabernacle or in the temple. And then he go to the most holy, and over there he offered the sacrifice for the whole nation. And before that he does that, he has to give his sacrifice. So that was the whole ritual. And in the Old Testament, it was all the covering. It was all like a shadow, which was trying to tell us this is the way it's going to be. So this is like a little bit, I gave you the overview how it was working. So the covenants were sealed through death. So remember, when Adam or Eve, they sinned and they tried to hide their sin, and at that time what happened? God actually sacrificed an animal and give them a skin covering so they can hide themselves. So whenever there was a covenant, there is a shedding of blood. And this was like rituals like back in the Mesopotamia, in that area, actually. Whenever, even like the people who actually they make any kind of like the covenant between them. So there was like if they are making any treaties, like two different tribes, they are making a treaty with each other in the Eastern, or like in Iraq or all those Middle Eastern areas. So what they do, they take an animal or more animals and they cut them in pieces. And I'm going to show you actually from the Bible. So in Genesis 15, 9 and 10, it says, "And he said to him, bring me a heifer, 3 years old, a female goat, 3 years old, a ram, 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these and cut them in half." So what happened? God is actually telling Abraham at that time to take those animals and cut them in half. And he said, laid each half over against the other, but he didn't cut the birds in half. So actually, this was the picture you can see. It was literally like that. So whenever there was a treaty or there's a covenant happening between two parties, so they were cutting it like this. So what is this? The meaning of this is if anybody is going to break the covenant, he's going to be like that animal. That was actually behind what the covenants are. So Abraham, then after that, if you read this whole chapter, we see that Abraham was sitting and he starts sleeping, and that God, a pillar of fire, actually went through these cut animals, which mean God himself, he passed through that, and he make a covenant with Abraham. And that was a covenant. We can see he gave him land and he gave him the blessings. And one of the blessings was very powerful, that through him, all the nations will be blessed. And it's it's like through his, it doesn't, when we say through your seed, and when he's talking about seed, it is like usually like through his generation, and not the generation which was not from the promised generation. But not through the Hajra, but only through the Sarah. He make that covenant, and that's pretty much is the overview of that. So let's even like if we go a little bit more in detail, so we can see that it was not just at that time, at the time of Jeremiah. We can see, and the man who transgressed my covenant and didn't keep the terms of the covenant they will made before me, and I will make them like the calf that they cut in two and pass between parts. So it's like the same thing. It's not just at that time. That was the way people make the covenants, and we can see that in Jeremiah. So the main thing I want to tell you, whenever there was a covenant, there was a shedding of blood. Even at that time, we see there was a covenant, and God shed the bloods of those animals. So now we're going to have another very important part of it, which is in Leviticus 17:11 again. It says, it is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. So atonement, we know that this is the same word in Hebrew and Urdu, kafara or kafar. So its literal meaning is to cover something, like to cover. If something God don't want to show, and He want to cover. So that's the meaning of that word. So, and whenever people were making a covenant, there was a sacrifice of bull, goats, or lambs. And that was what was happening. As I told you, they were covering at particular that problem for a season, for a few days. And whenever they do something else, they have to do it again. And that rituals will keep on going until we see that Moses came on the picture, and then he pretty much gave that a covenant. And that covenant was, this is the blood of the covenant that the Lord made for you. And what was that covenant actually? When Moses was at Mount Sinai, and he was telling them the law, like the 10 Commandments and all the other things. So first he has a sacrifice of animals, and he shed the blood of that animals on the peoples. So it was like trying to tell them that whatever he is doing, it can have a consequences. And the most of the consequences was blessings, because the blood represent the life. And then we see that the blood was using for the purification. In Hebrew 9:22 says, indeed under the law almost everything is purified with blood, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness of sin. So we can see these things like is starting in the Old Testament, and we see that this was keep on going. But in the New Testament, when Jesus came, and that's what I want to share with you today. So when Jesus came, the night when he was betrayed, he took cup, we just did that, and he said, this cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. So that's the most important thing actually we have to talk today. Everything else was just a shadow. So this particular cup, the people are confused a lot about this. That particular cup was a wine which was representing what Jesus is going to do with his life. And we know that He shed his blood on the cross, and with his blood, all of the humanities have a new life, and which was the everlasting life. So the 1 Peter 1:18-19 says, knowing that you were ransomed from the volatile ways inherited your forefather, not with the perishable things such as silver and gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish and spot. So we can see that when we have the life, and we get this life through the new covenant and Jesus shedding his blood on the cross. Amen.